Hello everyone. In the last video we talked about how you can store data in cookies, and cookies are actually stored on the client in the browser. In this video we're going to talk about how you can do something similar and you can store data on the server, and we call this session data when we store information about a user session on the server. And actually, what I'm going to show you is what we call session-based authentication, which uses a combination of both cookies and session data. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm looking at our login route. This is for our main app. It's app.js. So this file is not in the samples folder. This is our main app. Okay, and this was our first version of it here that I have commented out right now. And then what we did is we learned about bcrypt, and we learned how to encrypt the password. So in this version right here, we started using bcrypt actually what we're doing here is we're using bcrypt to compare passwords when they log in with the encrypted password that we have in our user's JSON file over here. Okay, what I want to do to just kind of clean this up, I'm just going to delete the code, our original code. You can leave that there if you want for historical purposes, but just to clean up this route, I'm going to go ahead and delete that. Let's see if I can fit this whole thing on one screen here. Okay, so there is our current login route. Okay, so we are going to modify this so that we can keep track of a user once they've logged in, and we'll be able to check to make sure that the user is logged in when they go to other pages on the website. Now, before we dive into this, we are going to set up a way to store data about users on the server, not with cookies, but we're going to just set up a little variable on the server, and it's going to be used to store information while the server is up and running. Okay, so it's real simple. All I'm going to do is down here, and I'm not sure where you'd want to put this. I'm just going to put it down here for now. So this is after the last route here and right before we start the server. Let's just create a constant, and we'll call it sessions. Okay, and we're just going to set it equal to an empty object. All right, so when you start the server, it's going to create this object, and as long as the server is up and running, we can use this object to put information into it about when users log in. All right, so keep that in mind. We'll be using the sessions variable throughout this video here. Okay, so now let's just quick walk through the login route here, the code for it. So as you know, a user goes to the login form and they have to enter their email and password. And then, their password, we stored that as in a hashed password in our user JSON file down here. So all the passwords should be hashed like this one down here. And so what we need to do is the email that they enter into our login form, we're going to use that to get the user information. So we imported the get user by email, and here we extract data from the post request. So this is what they typed into the login form. And then we use the email that they entered to get all the information about the user from our user JSON file. Okay, so once we get the user, we'll have their hashed password. Okay, now it's possible that a user doesn't match the email that was typed in, so we have an if statement here to check and see, make sure we have a user that matches the email that was typed into the login form. If not, we send this response, invalid email. Okay, if we do have a user, then we're going to take that user and look at its hashed password and compare it with the password that got entered into the login form. Okay, so if those two match, then the user authenticates themselves, because we know that they are who they say they are because they know the password and they entered it properly. Okay, so in that case, bcrypt will return true, and then if that's true, we know that they've logged in. If the result is false, then the hashes don't match, and we say wrong password. So there's a quick little review of how our login is working right now. So what we're going to do is we're going to get started right here when the user successfully logs in. you can go ahead and comment out that line. We're going to do something different with this branch of code here. What we're going to do is we're going to set a cookie and we're going to give it a name of session ID. And we want to set that the value of that to be some sort of random string. Okay, so now there are different ways of creating random strings in JavaScript, but what I'm going to do is just use a timestamp. It's kind of a cheap way of doing it, but that should give us something that's unique every time a user logs in. So this would cause a problem if two users logged in the exact same millisecond, because then they might have the same timestamp. But I'm just going to use it for purposes to keep things simple here. Okay, if that doesn't make sense, just hang in there and we'll explain it a little bit better. I'm going to declare a constant, and I'm going to call it timestamp. And hopefully you're familiar with a timestamp. It's the number of milliseconds that have elapsed since the epoch, which is January of 1970. And what I can do to get a timestamp is go new date. Hopefully you remember the date API. And then that's going to give me a date object. And if I call the get time method of that, so I'm doing some method chaining right here. If I call the get time method on a date object, it's going to return the number of milliseconds that have elapsed since from 1970, January 1, 1970, to whatever date that is storing right here. And you guys should know by now that when you create a date by calling the date constructor without passing in any parameters, it's going to return the current date and time. Okay, so this timestamp is going to represent the current time that a person's logging in milliseconds. Okay, all right, so the next thing we're going to do right here is we're going to use that timestamp to set a cookie. So to do that, we get a hold of the response object, res, and we call the cookie method. We learned about this in the last lesson right here. So when you set a cookie, you give it a name and you give it a value. We're just going to give this cookie name of session ID. It's our session ID cookie. Like this, and then we're going to set the value of it to be the timestamp, like that. So we're going to store the user's ID in a cookie, but we'll store any other information about the user that we want on the server in our session variable that we created below. Okay, sometimes you don't want to store information in a cookie because you're basically giving it to the client and they're storing it on their computer, and then you lose control over it. So for security purposes, you may want to store information on the server, and that way you maintain control over it. So what we're going to do is store information about the user that just logged in our session object that we created below. And we're going to use the timestamp as the key for that that maps to that user. I'll show you what I mean here. Here, now I'm going to take that sessions object, and I have to use bracket notation right here. I can't use timestamp like this because timestamp is a variable. So what I have to do, I can't use dot notation, I have to use bracket notation. But I want the key or the property name to be the timestamp. That's the ID of this session. And I want to set it equal to something about the user. So if I wanted to, I could store the entire user object in session. And then you could store, multiple pieces of information about the user. Maybe you'd want to do this. I mean, you could store stuff like a shopping cart as the user adds stuff to their cart. That might be a good example of what you might want to store in session. There are various uses for it. But just to keep things simple, I'm just going to store the user's first name in our session variable here. Okay. Now what I'm going to do, just so we can kind of observe this, is put a console log here. And we're just going to log that sessions object. Okay, and then finally, we need to send some sort of response. Otherwise, when I submit the login form, it's just going to hang. So just for now, I'm going to do res.send and just make it say logged in. I think that's what we had before. Okay, so here's what we have. All right, now let's give this a shot and see what happens here. I'm going to save my changes. Do I have NodeMon running here? I don't. Okay, let me just clear this out. I'm going to kill the server, Control C. Okay, like that, and start over. Okay, now let's set this up here. I'm going to go over to the browser, Chrome here. I'm going to delete any cookies that I had before, so I'm going to delete the cookies. And I have two users in my users JSON file. Let's just have a look at those real quick. So I have Koo at koo.com and set the Koo's password to test. And I also have Lee at lee.com, and I also set it to the same password. So I have two users in my JSON file. You may have other users, it doesn't matter, but the password should be hashed. So anyways, those are the two users that are signed up for the system so far. Okay, let's log in with Koo here. So I'm going to copy Koo's email address. I'm going to go over to the browser here. Looks like I've already got it typed in here for the email. I'm at the login route here, which shows us the login form. I'll log in with test, and then keep an eye on the cookies right there. What did I do wrong? Is the server running? Maybe I didn't start the server. Looks like I don't have the server running. Okay, so I'm going to do nodemon here and app.js. Okay, now the server is up and running. I'm going to hit the back button and try this over again. Okay, and I'll enter Koo at koo.com and test and log in. Okay, there we go. So what we did is we set a cookie that has a unique ID for its value. Okay, and then we used this unique ID as the key in our sessions object. And at that key, we can store information about the user that just logged in. Okay, now I'm going to go to another browser and pretend I'm a different user here. So here I'm in Edge. I'm going to go ahead and open up the developer tools. I'm not as familiar with the developer tools here, but let's see if I can get to the cookies here. Where are cookies here? Let me fumble around with this a little second here. So I think I have to press this to see the sources. That looks like a debugger, so that seems kind of weird. Maybe this will show me the cookies here. Let's see what happens. But I'll go ahead and log in. And it wants me to store this. So is this going to show me? There's the console log. Okay, I don't know where the cookies are in this new version of Edge, but anyways, it set a different cookie. But what I want to show you here is our log on the server. So first we logged in with Koo, and that's what our session was storing. So there's the unique ID, and there's the information about the user who just logged in. The second login, we added Lee to that object. So you can use this session object to keep track of who's logged in. And I'll show you in a minute here how when a user logs out, we'll remove them from the session, and we'll also delete their cookie. Okay. I do want to point out again that using a timestamp for your keys here is a bad idea, because what if Koo and Lee logged in at the exact same millisecond? Then we'd have a problem because they'd have the same ID. So you really want to use something better than a timestamp, but it's just quick and easy for this demonstration here. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to create a middleware function that can check to see if a user has logged in. And we can use that middleware function to check a user before they view any page to make sure that they're logged in. Okay, so here I'm going to go back over to app.js, and I'm going to just make that a little bit smaller here. So I'm going to put this I'm going to scroll down, and I'm going to put this middleware function right here. We probably should organize our code better. We kind of got things spread all over the place. But anyways, I'm going to use a classic old school function for this, because an arrow function would work if I put it up at the very top. So there are some differences between arrow functions and the old school classic functions, and we can talk about those in class. But anyways, let's declare a function using the function keyword and call it login check. And we're going to give it 3 parameters. So here we go. I set the table for it, and let's now fill in 3 parameters. And hopefully you remember from the middleware video, middleware functions have a rec for the request, a res for the response, and a next to call the next route handling function in the HTTP pipeline. Okay, so here's what we're going to do here is we want to extract the session ID cookie. So we can do it like this: const session ID equals rec.cookies. So remember, the request cookies property is going to be an object that has all the cookies in it. The cookie name is going to be the key, and the value is going to be whatever the value of the cookie is. So here's how, and actually I forgot something here. We're actually destructuring the cookies object. So we want to look for the session ID property in the cookies object like that. So I need to put the curly braces there because I'm destructuring this cookies object and pulling out the session ID property of it. Okay, and now what we want to do is check to see that it's truthy. So I'm going to go if, set the table for an if statement right here like that. If pair of parentheses, pair of curly braces, and I'm going to go if session ID, if that's truthy, and if we actually have that key in our sessions object. So I'm going to do double ampersand, and I'm going to check our sessions object and make sure that we actually have the matching key in the sessions object. So here I'll go session ID like that. Then we know the user has been authenticated and they have a session going on, so that we're storing all of our logged in users in that sessions object that we declared down below right here. Okay, so inside this if statement here, I'm going to add a property to the request object. So this is what's really cool about middleware, is you can take the request and add properties to it, and then route handlers further down the pipeline will have access to those properties. So I'm going to take the request object here, I'm going to add a username property to it like that, and I'm going to just set it equal to whatever we're storing in session. So I'm going to go sessions, and then bracket notation session ID equal, that's all we need. Okay, so yes, all we're storing for the session is the username. Now you might want to store other information too, but we just kept it simple. We're just storing the username here. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to call the next route handler in the pipeline. Okay, and so if the user has been logged in, we'll pull their name from session and we'll continue down the pipeline like that. If the user has not logged in, what we're going to do here is add an else, and we're going to redirect them to the login page and force them to log in. So to do that, I can take the response object and call the redirect method, and then we're going to redirect them to the login, and that will force them to log in. Okay, so this is the middleware function that we can use for all of our protected pages on our website. A protected page is one that requires you to be logged in before you can see it. Okay, so let's go ahead and put a protected route or a protected page into our application right here. So I'm going to go down here and I'm going to go app.get, and then let's call this members-only like that. So that's going to be the route, and then we're going to add our middleware function, login check right here, and then we're going to add the route handler for the members only here, and I'm going to set that up as an arrow function like this, and it's going to be rec and res, and I don't need the next parameter here. I don't think we need to use it, so I'm just going to leave it out. Okay, so when the request comes in for this page, we're going to do our login check. And if they're not logged in, that will redirect them to the login page. If they are logged in, we'll have a username property that's been attached to this rec parameter. Pretty cool here. Okay, so what we can do here is let's just make this, we'll do res.send and hello, and we'll concatenate rec.username here. Okay, so all right, I think that's what we need right here, and now we can try this out. All right, so I'm going to save that. Now, you know what? NodeMon just restarted the server and killed all the sessions. So this is something you need to be aware of. This is why you might want to store your session data in a database that gets it's persistent. We're just storing it in memory when the app is running. In the real world, you might want to store the session data in a database. That way, if the server restarts, all your users who are logged in won't get kicked out, because you can pull the session data from a database. And I think I gave you a link on how to do that with a MySQL database. That's in the page that goes with this video here. Okay, so when NodeMon restarted, it's going to kick out all the users, so I'm going to have to log in again here. So, but let's just go back to the browser. Whoops. This is Edge. I like Chrome. I'm going to stick to Chrome right here. I'm going to go, let's try that members only page right here and see what happens. So I'm going to go members only, and now remember I'm not logged in. So gave me an internal server error. Let's see what's going on. What did I do wrong here? Something, let me look at this. Okay, so the problem is that I didn't set up the cookie parser. So if you don't set up the cookie parser middleware, then you won't have this cookies object. So what I need to do is set up that middleware. I'm just going to scroll up to the top and set it up real quick. I'm going to go all the way up here. So here's the middleware section. This is probably where we should put our login check too, but I'm just going to paste those 2 lines of code in, and then hopefully I won't have that problem again. Now I can work with cookies. Okay, that should fix that problem. I'm going to save my changes. The server is going to restart and delete any sessions that were in play. So like I said, you might want to store session data actually in a database and not in memory when the program's running. But let's try this again here. So I'm going to go over to Chrome, hit the back button. I'm going to, did I really log in? Let me just start over here. All right. We got a little bit of a mess here. I'm going to try going to the members only page. I'm not sure if I really am logged in or not, because I just hit the back button here. Okay, I tried to go to the members only page and it redirected me to the login here. I still have the old session ID down here, but remember I deleted the session on the server. So that's another thing that's interesting about this is if you want to kick a user out and force them to log out, you can just remove them from the session object that we were playing with on the server here. Anyways, let's start the process all over again. I'm going to log in as Ku here. Okay, now I'm logged in. Now I got a new session ID. If I look over here, I see that the session object on the server is storing, there's the matching session ID, and all we're doing is storing Ku's first name, but we could be storing the whole entire user object and their shopping cart and whatever else we want to store for that session. Okay, so now let's go to the members page and see what happens here. Before, it redirected us back to the login. So I'm going to go to members only, but now it says hello Ku, and Ku is in and has been authenticated, and that's pretty cool. So this is what's called session-based authentication. So you have to understand how cookies work and how you can store session data for your users who have a session going, who are logged in. You can store that information on the server. Ideally, we'd store it probably in a database, and we can talk about other advantages to that. But just to keep things simple, we created a little session object, and we were storing all of our user sessions in that object. Now, there are also NPM packages that you can install that will store session data for you, and I didn't want to bother with those. I just wanted to keep it as simple as possible. Okay, so now, yeah, it's really important to understand session-based authentication, and like I said, it uses cookies and session data stored on the server. So we store the session ID in a cookie, and that's how we identify the user, and whenever they make a request, we grab that cookie and see if we have a matching key in our session information. If we do, we know the user's logged in. Okay, now what about logging out a user? Let's go ahead and create a log out route. So I'm going to go back over to our kind of messy app.js file. I'll just scroll down and we'll add another route. I guess we'll add this route. We can add the logout route right before our sessions object. So here we can go app.get, and then we're going to make our route to log out. And I'll go ahead and set up the route handler function, rec and res. So there we go. There's the beginning of our logout route. So here what we want to do is grab that session ID cookie. So we'll go const, and I'm going to destructure it just like what we did up above. Session ID equals rec.cookies. There we go. And then again, like what we did up above, we're going to check to make sure that we actually have the cookie and that it's also stored in our sessions object, just like what we did up above. So like that, and we're using bracket notation because I can't use dot notation. Sometimes you can't use dot notation. So there's our if statement. And then I'm just going to remove that property from the sessions object and then clear the cookie. So what I can do here is go delete. Have you ever done this? Deleted a property from an object? I'm not sure if we've actually done that, but to do it, you type in delete and then sessions, and then the property that we want to delete is session ID, like that. So that will actually remove that property from an object. You can use the delete keyword to remove a property from an object in JavaScript. The other thing I want to do is clear the cookie. So I can take the response object and call clear cookie. And then the cookie that we're clearing is the session ID cookie. Like that. Alrighty. Let's put a console log here too so that we can see that session object on the server. Oops, there we go, console log sessions. And that should do it. I guess we'll do a res.send and say you are logged out. We might want to redirect them to the login page here so that they could log in, but I'll just do this for now. Save that. Go back over to the browser. Let me go back to Chrome. So here's where Koo is on the members page. Now we would have a link for them to log out. We don't have that, but we probably should for a finished site. But I'm just going to go to the log out route like this. It doesn't look like it's working. Do I have the server? All right, so NodeMon is messing with me because every time I save a change, it restarts the server and then it clears out our session object when the app starts again. So maybe I don't want to be using NodeMon here. That's the problem I had. The other problem I had is let's move this res.send to, we want to, the reason why the browser was hanging is because we lost the session. Because as I said, we restarted the server, so the session got killed, and then we never ended up in this if branch here. So I'm just going to take this line, the res.send, and cut it, and then move it outside of the if statement, so it's going to run no matter what happens here. So that was one of the other problems we had here. Okay, so I don't really, NodeMon is really getting in my way here because every time it restarts the server, we lose our sessions. So anyways, I'll just deal with it for now. I'm going to save this. And now I have to start over because all the sessions got killed right here. So that's okay. Good practice. All right, so I'm going to go to the login page. Well, actually, right here, if I refresh now, Koo will get booted back to the login page. So I'm going to go ahead and refresh. The session was lost, so we got redirected. Here, I'm going to log in again. Koo and test. Okay, Koo is now logged in. I should be able to see the members page. So members only, hello Koo, that's great. Now let's log out here. And by the way, there's our session ID. And here I'm going to go to log out. Okay, now it says I'm logged out. Let's check the console log. Okay, look at, so there's the console log from when Koo logged in. There's the console log from logging out. It removed Koo from the session object. and the cookie should no longer be there. The cookie is gone, so Ku is effectively logged out. And I think that's all we needed to do. Is there anything else? I believe that's it. Okay, so now you know how to implement session-based authentication in a Node.js app. You have to understand cookies, and you have to understand how you can store information on the server while the web application is running. Ideally, we'd use a database to store the session information. But the other thing that's interesting too is you can boot a user out by removing them from that session object on the server. Now for our final project for this class, we're going to use what's called token-based authentication, which is a little bit different, and you lose some of that control, but we'll talk about that another time. Okay, anyways, that'll do it.